real peace is not just a lack of murdering each other for a few minutes. That's maybe a ceasefire at best. Real peace means that you are thinking about the others. What can I do for them to make their lives better? Proactively seeking the goodness and welfare.
Things are changing, and we need to be aware of that because we don't have any friends on the left. Very soon, we're not going to have many friends on the right either, and Israel will stand alone.
You know that the intentions are impure and cynical when they're saying no, but you have to give us Judea, so you have to have an Arab Palestinian terrorist state in your midst in order to have this deal in Gaza. Then you understand what it's really about.
Welcome to the Israel Guys, where we believe that in a world of anti-Israel propaganda and Jew hatred, you should always connect to the land and the people of Israel. What's happening in the land of Israel? There's so much to talk about this week. Happy to have you with us. Make sure you're subscribed and all those notifications are on, and put a comment down below if this is your first time watching or listening. As always, we'd love to hear from you. Ari said he reads all of the comments every single week. So also good to be with you, Joshua Waller, Rabbi Ari Abramowitz, Rabbi Jeremy Gimpel. There's so many topics to dive into this week, but obviously the big one is that Vice President J.D. Vance visited Israel day before yesterday. There was a lot of other things that also happened on that day, but I think we'll dive right into the story of what happened while the vice president was here. But first, let's watch this video.
Our warning to Hamas is very straightforward. The terms of the 20-point plan that the president put out there is very clear. It's supported not just by Israel, but by all of our Gulf Arab friends. It's that Hamas has to disarm. It's that Hamas has to actually behave itself, and that Hamas, while all the fighters can be given some sort of clemency, they're not going to be able to kill each other, and they're not going to be able to kill their fellow Palestinians. Now, again, that's going to take a little bit of time. We're talking about how to set up the security and humanitarian apparatus to put all this in place. But right now, where I stand, I feel confident that we're going to be in a place where this peace lasts, where it's durable. And if Hamas doesn't cooperate, then as the President of the United States has said, Hamas is going to be obliterated.
Jeremy, do you want to give your initial thoughts on this speech? It feels like something that has been said for at least the 10th time already. And already we're seeing reports, I saw a report this week that Hamas still has 20,000 fighters in the Gaza Strip, and that more than 50% of the tunnel network is still intact.
Not only that, there's reports now that drones are smuggling new weapons into Israel and into Gaza. They've maybe blocked the roads, but you can't stop little drones that are flying over with magazines, flying over with guns. They're not disarming, they're rearming. They're already killing hundreds of Arabs that are in Gaza that haven't supported Hamas. And when he said Hamas has to behave itself, I felt like that's where I lost him. Hamas has to behave itself, or Hamas will be obliterated, or the gates of hell will open. We've just heard these empty words so many times, and the fact that he's saying that means that he doesn't understand that we are dealing with ISIS, that we're dealing with evil, people that celebrate death, and that there's no behaving with them. And they not only need to be obliterated, they need to be destroyed. There's no one to talk to. There never will be peace with such an evil enemy. And that's the point. If we don't start dealing in terms of light and darkness, of good and evil, and realize that that exists in the world, that there is real good and there's real evil, this will never come to a resolution.
Well, I also think that it's interesting because I believe that is being distracted right now. Nobody's talking about what you just said, Jeremy. They're thinking about, well, how are we going to get the rest of the hostages out? And even in the press releases that I saw from the vice president, he was saying, everybody needs to be patient. We need to take time. This is going to take time. Some of these hostages are now buried underneath thousands of tons of rubble, and it's going to take us time. I think that is a distraction from the real point that will never be achieved. And the time is not going to lead to what everyone's thinking is, and that is the Hamas is never going to disarm. They're never going to be at peace.
Well, they're already rearming by all counts and all measures. And, you know, we were in the Knesset 2 days ago, and something some of the Knesset members said, including some ministers in the government, is that Hamas absolutely knows where the bodies of hostages are, and it's their choice if they're not returning them. And if I remember correctly, part of this whole ceasefire deal was that the living hostages and the dead hostages were to be returned, I believe, 10 days ago now.
Well, part of the ceasefire deal was also that there was going to be a ceasefire. Whereas the morning after the ceasefire, 2 Israeli soldiers were killed.
One of them, a friend of a very good friend of ours.
Right. And that's sort of like, oh, well, we so badly want this reality to happen. You know, I just saw this headline here in the Babylon Bee, which is, it says, with Israel withdrawal, Hamas finally able to conduct public executions in peace. Right. That is actually what's really happening there. The very fact I learned in my personal life journey that you could have the best handshake, the best contract, but if you know that there's no goodwill on the other side, don't go into the deal. There is the fact that you need to have a 20-point peace plan really says everything that you need to know about what this is. You know, there's a verse in Psalms that says, "Laman achai v'ra'ai adabrana shalom bach." For may there be well-being within your ramparts, peace be in your citadels. For the sake of my kin and my friends, I pray for your well-being. Why do I quote that verse? Because real peace is not just a lack of murdering each other for a few minutes. That's maybe a ceasefire at best. Real peace means that you are thinking about the others. What can I do for them to make their lives better? Proactively seeking the goodness and welfare. And to think, that's why when Trump was standing in the Knesset, and by the way, I actually think he was really, truly well-intentioned, good-hearted. He wants to see goodness in the world. But to say, there's peace in the Middle East, and they're calling him President Peace, let's not, come on. There's no peace happening here with these people.
Well, there was a real clash between Netanyahu and Vance. And I don't think people noticed it, but Netanyahu actually said in a press conference after that speech, he said, Israel is not an American protectorate. And a protectorate is a vassal state that's controlled and protected, but mostly controlled by a bigger state. And Netanyahu is saying, listen, this is not the way it's going to be, which really means that's what's happening right now. But the point is that I think that Vance is sort of a window in to the future of America-Israel relations at best.
Right.
And it's already getting shaky. It's already looking like Israel will ultimately have to become independent, have to stand alone. It's our destiny. It's what will be.
We'll get back to the podcast in just a second, but first I want to extend a very special invitation to you. That is the all-men's pruning trip to Israel. It's coming up February 16th through March 1st. It's just for men, fathers and sons. This is an awesome opportunity for you to come to the land of Israel. It's a volunteer trip. We get to prune the vines, cut back the vines and the vineyards of Judea and Samaria. You get lots of discipleship, growth. You get to step away from the busyness of life and work, connect with God, connect with the land of the Bible, connect with your faith, see the biblical sites of Israel, go to Jerusalem, meet incredible pioneers in the land of Israel. And you can do all of that in a 2-week trip. It's affordable. It's a way to serve and bless the land of Israel and the people of Israel. It's February 16th through March 1st. We'll put a link in the description below where you can find out more information. You can sign up now. Registration is open right now, but it's a very special opportunity. Our trips do fill up sometimes. So check it out right now. And we would love to see you in Israel this winter, February 16th through March 1st. Now, back to the podcast.
Well, I think really when you look at the Abraham Accords and you see the cast of characters, how they're reacting now and how they were reacting the first round in the Abraham Accords, you see that the Abraham Accords could happen in either direction, but the posture of Israel will determine whether it happens from a position of strength, an authentic Abraham Accords, which will actually result in peace and respect and a very positive relationship based on true friendship. And that was what was happening when these moderate Arab countries were looking at Israel and America and seeing a solid alliance and seeing unwavering strength. Or it could happen with the Saudi Arabia saying, well, this is all going to be determined on whether Israel creates a Palestinian state and compromises on this and weakens themselves in this direction. They're putting their finger to the wind and they're saying, are we going to side with the jihad or are we going to side with a strong Israel? That's the equivalent. And so I think Israel needs to hear when Saudi Arabia makes these demands that they create a Palestinian state, that's not a request, but it's a challenge. It's a question they're asking. Are you going to weaken yourselves and emasculate yourselves and come begging to us for peace? Because then you'll get a certain type of peace. Or are you going to be strong and resolute in God's promise to you and in the land that he gave you? In which case we can also shake your hand, and that will be from a position of respect.
So Bibi Netanyahu to Channel 14 this week said, quote, "The war in Gaza will end for good when the terms of the agreement that were accepted are implemented. That includes, first of all, stage one, the return of all of our hostages. We're working on that right now. We're standing firm on the agreement being implemented in its entirety. If Hamas does not agree to disarm, it will be done the hard way. Only after Hamas is disarmed and Gaza demilitarized, then the war will end." I believe Trump, so we saw the clip of Vance. I believe Trump has also said, anytime I can give Israel the green light, right? And Trump said it so many times. Hamas already violated the ceasefire, killed 2 IDF soldiers, attacked Israel, and still the statements going to the media from Israel and from the United States are, well, if Hamas does not disarm, if they uphold the terms of the ceasefire, we're 10 days in. They didn't uphold the ceasefire for 2 minutes, and they still haven't released all the hostages. They have not shown even a sign of disarming. The question is, when will Israel actually go in and finish business? Because it's only a matter of time.
Well, there's a force in Israel that's saying, listen, we can't rely on the United States. We can't rely on the Arabs in Gaza, the Hamas, Saudi Arabia. What we need to do is apply sovereignty, create independence, and do it now. And while Vice President Vance was in Israel, the Knesset actually passed this preliminary bill, which is sort of a statement. It doesn't mean anything practical. It's just noise. But the fact that that noise is being voiced means that there's a voice within Israel that is demanding that Israel stand alone.
Well, I actually disagree with you. I don't think that to say it doesn't mean anything. A lot of times I'm understanding that this region that we're living in and in the real world, ideas and posturing and principle matters more than actual policy. Meaning to be able to come out and the Arabs, the jihadist world understands that, right? Qatar demanded an apology from Netanyahu, and he's like, okay, well, if I'll get my short-term policy goals, I'll say the words I need to say in order to get the... But it's not about the short-term policy goals. It's about truth and the divine rights that are given to us by God. Or are we compromising and postulating and what's the word I'm looking for?
Giving in, am I right?
Giving in. We're surrendering the truth in hopes of acquiring some sort of short-term strategic gain. And that's a big mistake that Israel made and has always made. And we have to understand that words matter arguably more than anything else.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm most concerned about is that Israel is continuously looking towards America, looking to rely on America, looking for their approval. And I think right now we're sort of like navigating this very narrow bridge, but the future is going to be different. I watched Senator Ted Cruz speak at this Israel event, and it was remarkable because he's from the inside, and he's saying that within the right-wing conservative American movement, there is a huge shift now to stand against Israel and against the Jewish people. Check this out.
But there is a danger that is very real, and we've talked about anti-Semitism. Listen, about a decade ago, anti-Semitism began rising on the left. And the Democratic Party did nothing. And in the decade that followed, it has consumed the Democrat Party. I do not believe this is exaggeration to say there is a real and meaningful pro-Hamas contingent of the Democrat Party in Washington. And the remainder of the Democrats are terrified of the pro-Hamas contingent. We know that. But the danger that I want to highlight to you tonight is not anti-Semitism on the left. It is anti-Semitism on the right. And I'm here to tell you, in the last 6 months, I have seen anti-Semitism rising on the right in a way I have never seen it in my entire life.
And so he's saying in the last 6 months, he's saying it. All right, there's a trajectory here. There's something that's happening. We can see it on the mouthpieces. We can see it on the podcast. We can see it in politics. It's just things are changing, and we need to be aware of that because we don't have any friends on the left. Very soon, we're not going to have many friends on the right either, and Israel will stand alone.
You know, it's fascinating because I was just, I was actually right outside the King David Hotel as Vance was coming in and the whole thing was shut down. And that's not really what I'm talking about, but that was just the setting that I was in when I was at a meeting with a bunch of influencers. And it was fascinating. As I talked to these influencers, they have these, you know, some of them hundreds of thousands of followers on social media. And I asked them one question just to see where their reach was. And they all said that their reach was older. Their reach across the world was 60 plus. And I was even talking to young people who have these TikTok channels and all of this stuff, and still their reach was 40 plus. And this is where I'm worried, because what we've just listened to here is very true, as Ted Cruz is talking about. And we don't even have a voice in the matter. The younger people where this is all coming from, this anti-Semitism that's being just exploding in our Western culture, we don't even have a voice in that discussion. They're not listening to us. I mean, it's something to really worry about. I was with the largest pro-Israel voices, and they're not listening to us, even though we have huge followings, even here. How this is a huge problem that I don't know how.
I think it's a huge problem for you. Right, because
right.
Your challenge,
like I'm in Israel.
Yeah, no, your challenge as a righteous of the nations, not only one of the righteous of the nations, but arguably one of the leading voices that's actually shining that light, is to appeal to them. But when I hear you saying they're not listening to us, I'm asking myself, are we listening to him? Because that's what this is ultimately about. When I hear this coming from Ted Cruz, I'm like, wow, what am I actually hearing? He's saying, yes, the left has been hating Jews and hating Israel for a long time, but now it's overwhelmingly on the right. And I hear Genesis chapter 31, where Jacob looked at Laban, and his face, his manner towards him, Vayar Yaakov et pnei Lavan v'hine einenu imo kitmol shilshom. It was not, his face was not the same to him as it was the day before. He lost its grace. He started turning against Jacob on a more fundamental level. And that's when Jacob understood it's time to go back to the land of Israel. It's time to go home. This is what's happening. Again, Jeremiah chapter 16:16. I will first send fishers to bring back my people, then I will send hunters. That's what this is all about. So we could try to fight it in the world of Hasbara and advocacy, and we do this approach and that approach. But sometimes, like when the nation of Israel came back and complained to Moses, we're not entering the land, the spies. And he said, you're not going in for 40 years. The next morning they woke up and said, we're going to war. He said, don't do it. This is not the time for that. God is not with you in that. We can try to fight this movement that's happening, but I think the real message needs to really be, at least from our perspective, nation of Israel, in Israel, around the world, in the exile, in the diaspora, let us turn our hearts back to God. Listen to his voice. Listen to what he is telling us. Return home, return to the land, and return to him. That's what this is all about.
I feel like that's exactly what Yuli Edelstein in the Knesset just did. He went opposed to because again, we're talking about this big clash that just happened between the vice president and Bibi Netanyahu, and Yuli Edelstein just added to this fire a little bit just now, because he was doing not the politically correct thing to do at the moment, but the biblically correct thing to do at the moment, and that is to declare sovereignty over Judea and Samaria. When he did that, his party, I mean, they got the majority of the vote in the Knesset, which is astounding. We're talking about a big war around the world, but there's something else happening here in Israel that's absolutely phenomenal. The Knesset, for the first time, I mean, I'm super excited about this. I don't trust that politically that there's not going to be something that's going to stop it. And I think we all probably agree on that. But the fact that the majority of the Knesset ruled that there should be sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, as Vance is here, as Rubio is flying in, literally he's on the airplane coming in, and the Knesset votes for sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, like right in front of the world.
Can we expound on-
almost immediately, Marco Rubio came out saying the annexation of Judea and Samaria could jeopardize the agreement in Gaza. Like immediately there was pushback.
Like, what does one have to do with the other?
Right,
That's
that's
kind of
the first
question.
Abraham Accords. What felt to the nation of Israel is so true was that real peace is about looking at your adversary and saying, do we want peace with each other? Not if you give us this and you give us that and you weaken yourselves. There was none of that stuff with the Abraham Accords. So you know that the intentions are impure and cynical when they're saying no, but you have to give us Judea, so you have to have an Arab Palestinian terrorist state in your midst in order to have this deal in Gaza. Then you understand what
And
it's
better than
really
that even.
about.
With Jerusalem, East Jerusalem as its capital.
With
Saudi
Jerusalem
Arabia
as its
just
capital.
mandated
Sure.
that.
That's why
that was their mandate.
the
for this
real
whole thing.
story here is exactly what you just said. Is this about annexing the West Bank, or is this about declaring sovereignty in Judea?
Yeah.
Words matter a lot, which is why when I even hear people from our ideological spiritual side saying the words in order for the international community to agree with them and to be included in the Overton window, but they say annexing the West Bank, they've already lost the war.
Because who are the West Bankians anyway?
Who's the West Bankians, and why do they say annexing is
You're
when
looking at 'em,
you are
folks.
going and you are bringing in and attaching to yourself something that does not belong to you. You are annexing it.
What about it?
I can't annex my own right arm onto my body. Okay, that's what. So it's sovereignty, declaring sovereignty in Judea. If Judea isn't called Judea, then Jews don't have a right to that land. That's the reason they're calling it the West Bank. Because as much as they get the settlers out of the West Bank, they get the Jews out of Judea. That is our connection to the land. So what the real story here is that vote was happening, and that vote passed in the Knesset, in the government of Israel. They knew what they were doing.
Oh, yeah.
And they had the character, not only because they themselves had the character to make the vote, but because they're looking at the people and they want to represent the people and they want to get back into the Knesset, and they understand that there is a massive, overwhelming spiritual return, not only just on a religious keeping the commandments level, but on the deeper level of connecting to our Jewish identity, to our actual, not only faith in God, but trust in Him. Trust in Him, meaning that we're willing to act on that faith. Here's a clip I want to play. I guess we're going to have to subtitle it. I just saw it in the Israeli news. Listen to this.
קורה אחרי המלחמה במדינת ישראל, זו תופעה פשוט מדהימה. אולי אתה מדבר על אילנה דיין שאומרת לה לאיזה עקיצה, אבל זה לא מייצג את הציבור בעם ישראל ומה שקורה פה. אתם יודעים מה הטרנד הכי חם בקרב בני נוער בחילונים במדינת ישראל? טרנד שמירת שבת. יש לי חבר, בן שלו בן 15, להפטרה בקושי עלה, אומר לי, אבי, הבן שלי חודשיים שומר שבת. אני אומר לו, ממתי שומר שבת?
אבל זה תלוי איפה, זה לא כולם ככה.
מסתבר שמדובר פה בעשרות אלפי בני נוער, שמה שקרה, הם גידלו דור של בורים עם כל העדתה במערכת החינוך, שלא נתנו להם שום ידע ביהדות. ואז קרה 7 באוקטובר, והם ראו פתאום את כל החטופים שחוזרים, ומדברים על אלוהים.
יש פה קטע שאנשים שחוזרים מאוד אמוניים מהמנהרות, כלומר,
וזה משפיע על כולם.
עובר עליהם אירוע דתי, לא כולם.
אבל החטופים האלה, זה לא נשאר רק
אני רוצה להראות לכם
אצלם.
את עומר שם טוב. עומר שם טוב, כן? בכל סיג שאני רואה שלו, אני אומר, בונה, בן אדם הזה גם מואר. זה רמה כל כך גבוהה של אנשים, הדברים שהם אומרים, תראו בבקשה מה הוא אומר, תראו.
לא משנה מה זה, ואיך, ומתי. תהיה בדרך, תגיד תודה, ברוך השם. כשאתה אומר ברוך השם על כל דבר שמגיע אליך, בסוף אתה... השם יהיה איתך, לא משנה מתי.
That was Omer Shem Tov. We have I personally subtitled a video 4 minutes of a speech that he was giving just off the cuff, where he actually said the words. Keep in mind, this man was 40 meters underground in a pit, in a dark hole, getting less than 1 pita a day, starving to death. He couldn't stand up straight. He couldn't lift his arms. And he says the following sentence. He said, "You know what I miss the most from my captivity?" Just that is an insane thing to say. Do you know what I missed the most? He said those words, and he said, "I miss the light and the connection that I felt to God. Never have I felt God so powerfully." Keep in mind, he's saying this with tattoos on his arms. He was a DJ in the Nova concert that was happening on the holiday of Shmini Atzeret. So it's not like he went into this war some sort of Breslov chassid. You know, he went in as that, and he was in that pit, and he says he's tried to foster that connection since then, and he's had his moments, and he talks to God every day, and but that light, You know, and a lot of these testimonies from it, that's why I was like, why does it have to be the way it is? We didn't understand. God needed to take those that seemed on the surface to be the furthest away from him in order that when he brings them back to him through plunging them into the depths of such darkness that the light that they would shine would inspire the entire nation. And that's what's happening right now. That's the real story. Everything else is a lot of talking heads and a lot of chatter by Saudi Arabia and by Rubio, who's a good guy. I'm not anti-Rubio. I'm just saying the real story is God's hand in all of this.
So what is the big thing? So if Rubio's saying, hey, this is going to disrupt a strong Israel, meaning, I don't know if he understands what he's saying. A strong Israel is going to disrupt our plans for Gaza.
Can I back up a little bit? Because I feel like our audience is probably interested in this topic of sovereignty. But I also want to explain it for people too, and explain what the world sees versus what actually would have to happen. Because you just mentioned
Very good, Luke. Yeah, I think
most of the world sees it as annexation. I would even venture to say Rubio, Vance, Trump, they all would use the word annexation. I believe Trump actually said a few weeks ago, I will not let Bibi or Israel annex the West Bank. I think he said those exact words. But like you were saying, there's no annexation needed. Annexation is if Israel wanted to take Jordan or the Sinai,
not even Jordan, actually,
and add it
biblically correct, because it means if you didn't
in modern politics. Let's say in modern politics,
yeah.
Right? If they wanted to take land that was not theirs, add it to the nation of Israel, that's annexation. People don't understand. East Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, it's already belonged to Israel since 1967. The only thing Israel has not done is applied sovereign law. So therefore,
it's belonged to Israel since 1948.
Correct, yeah.
BCE.
I was about to say, I was going to correct you. But Israel has not applied sovereign law, so there's a different set of rules. The way it's like the civilian version of or what is it called? The like civilian department of the military basically governs Judea and Samaria. But when you see the headline, Knesset passes law to apply sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, Jeremy, you were explaining to me how it's really just a statement. And the fact that they did it on the day that J.D. Vance was in the Knesset, it was definitely, they were trying to say something. Bibi even tried to forbid a lot of members of the Knesset from voting. Some people are actually having the guts to stand up to Netanyahu now, which is very interesting. We were in the Knesset on that same day. I think it was the same day.
With Edelstein as well.
And a lot of the ministers and members of Knesset, you could tell they are very pro-sovereignty. But
can I just say something that we overheard in that? Just this is inspire everybody. One of the Knesset members stood up in the halls of the Knesset and said to our whole team that was there was a big event going on, and he said this. He said, and I'll paraphrase it, but he said, "Thank you for standing with us as we build the Israel and become a light to all the nations, as is our purpose, to build the house of prayer for all nations." This is coming from a Knesset member. He said to build the temple on the mountain of God and to then bring light to the whole world. Thank you for being here to support Israel's purpose in the world. That was Ohad Tal.
Okay.
I was sitting there.
But
thinking,
what was interesting to me in listening to all the Knesset members is you had very religious, like Ohad Tal, religious Zionists, religious Zionism, right? And then you had like really secular, even some left wing, and they were all like, it was like listening to the same people. They were all very. Like there's definitely a shift even going on in the Knesset for sure. But what I wanted to get back to is that for a law to pass or legislation to pass has to go through 3 readings, including like debates in the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Defense Committee. Yuli Edelstein already got kicked out of.
Well, he got kicked out of because as soon as he did
because he voted, he dared to vote against party
lines,
against Bibi, not party lines, because we know the Likud is pro-sovereignty.
Right. But nobody else in that party, from what I understand, was treated like he was. And I don't think they voted for it. Likud was voted, or else they would have been kicked
also,
out.
You mentioned, Jeremy, there was only 49 members of Knesset that voted out of 120, which is something kind of unique to Israel's parliament, that they don't have to have a majority of the Knesset present to vote on legislation.
In the preliminary votes, they don't need that. And so there was a majority, but it wasn't a very impressive majority, but it was a voice that was said, and that voice needed to be heard.
Right.
But what's happening, I believe, is that there's a spiritual setup that's happening now. And we are going to have to stand up against Saudi Arabia, against the United States, and everyone is going to want to pressure us. And it's exactly at that point that we need to choose. Do we fear the nations or do we fear God?
What do you think about what Bibi's saying here to the vice president? What is he saying when he says, we're not your vassal state?
I think he's speaking which he wishes that we weren't America's vassal state. But right now, he is literally towing the line of everything that President Trump wants. So he needs to say that just to save face in the eyes of Israelis.
He also needs to say that because Vance just said that. So he needs to sort of repeat that. Too. Right.
We are not the protector.
Right. It's true.
That's true, right? That's what we're holding right now?
That's what I was supposed to say. I mean, there is that sense. I did see this week a really awesome thing, and that is that Israel was number 10 in the most powerful countries in the whole world. I think that's phenomenal. And the fact that this nation...
Well, and just to add on to that too, like if you look at the list, all of the other like top 10, it's like this nation has 347 million in their population. This nation has, 180 million. And then it's like get to number 10 million civilian, citizens in their population.
There's nothing like it in the world. This is a absolute phenomenon that a nation just reborn. We're talking about other nations around the world. I mean, all these countries all over the place that have been founded for hundreds and hundreds of years have nothing compared to this new phenomenon that is Israel. The Jewish people have returned to the land and become now the 10th most powerful nation on the planet. I think that that's miraculous. And the fact that Israel can even talk about standing on its own 2 feet. I was just reading an article by a local rabbi here saying we need to move away from the American, like this line of support that's coming from America. All of this foreign aid from the military to the economy to all these things. Thankfully, Israel has moved away from the economic aid that was for years. And now it's time to do the next big step, to move away from that military aid that literally shackles Israel's hands right now. Right. With Gaza, we can't do anything because Trump and all the big shots are coming in to say, we mandate. That's exactly why are all these people here right now? Because they have other plans against what Israel wants to do. And they're mandating that they toe the exact line of what President Trump wants of Israel. That's why Rubio's lining right now, by the way. Got to be. That's what he said he's here for.
We'll get back to the show in just a second, but first, I did want to remind you guys that all of the content here at the Israel Guys is absolutely free. We plan to keep it that way. We're not running paid advertising on the channel anymore, but the only way all of this is possible, it takes a lot of cameras and gear, and we have a crew running everything behind the scenes. The only way it's possible is because of people just like you. I want to thank you so much for all of the incredible support that we've received this year, especially in the last couple of months as we've been winding down paid advertising on the channel. And as you've noticed, we no longer have that going on, but we need the biggest partners, and the best way for you to support the work of the Israel Guys is becoming a monthly donor. You can become a member of the Israel Guys monthly donor program. We do some really cool stuff. We put out behind the scenes photos and videos. We have a photo of the month. We have exclusive discounts to our online store, and we have a monthly live stream where you can connect with people like myself, Joshua Waller, other people from our team. You can interact. You can ask us questions. We'll give you exclusive updates from the land. But all of that comes when you join up as a monthly donor to the Israel Guys, and you are pushing our work forward. It's only because of people like that we continue keeping all of the content free and pumping out to you guys every single week. We'll put a link in the description below. Thank you so much for all of your support. Please consider becoming a monthly donor today. Now, back to the show.
Here's my question. Why is it that the two-state solution, or on the opposite side of the spectrum, sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, why is that always the number one issue for any nation when it comes to Israel, no matter what the topic is? It could be a ceasefire in Gaza. It could be Vance visiting. It could be Witkoff, Kushner, Marco Rubio. They could be coming to Israel for completely unrelated purposes, but every single time, if anything comes up with the two-state solution or sovereignty, that's always the most important thing. Saudi Arabia already came, obviously has come out because Saudi Arabia is about to visit the White House. And the big, one of the big topics is normalization, joining the Abraham Accords. But obviously, number one issue, if Israel dares to not implement the two-state solution, then no normalization.
Well, it's not really about a two-state solution or not a two-state solution. It's entirely about the land of Israel. That's what this whole war is about. That's what all these nations are. It's like an axis of one promise in the Torah, because that's all there was. There was one promise given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and the children of Israel forever. That's it. God made it very simple. He promised the children of Israel the land of Israel. That's why, will there be a two-state solution? Will there be sovereignty? Will God's promise be fulfilled or not? And so there will be forces against that happening in the world. And our job as the people of Israel is to finish the job and reclaim the land that was promised to us.
But that is not going to be expressed. The final expression of that will be through policy. But the real gauge in the eyes of God and the eyes of truth is what's happening in our hearts. Meaning the head of the coalition, Bibi, came and said, do not vote for the sovereignty. It will annoy and upset America, which is the definition of a lack of sovereignty. One nation taking directives from another nation about the policy they're doing.
Was that before or after he said that Israel's not, a protectorate? Or America's not Israel's protectorate.
Exactly. Whereas just last week, I remember him saying, we are the junior partner and America's the senior partner. He said those words last week. I'm sure we have the clip. But anyways, the real question is about that real sovereignty. I've been saying this a long time. The minute we ever say to anyone, please support us in our sovereignty, it's not sovereignty. If we need anyone's blessing, anyone's support, it's not true sovereignty. Sovereignty comes from within and will be expressed in policy. But when we understand that that sovereignty is a God-given right, truth, and reality, that the Judea only blossoms and gives forth its fruit. It's been barren and desolate and empty for thousands of years. And then the nation of Israel returns and all of a sudden it's turning green and giving forth its fruit. It's because there's a reality, a truth there, that the nation of Israel and the land of Israel, that the Jewish people and Judea are connected in a real, the beating of the heart. Our heart is connected to this land. And so really it's an issue that they have with Jewish strength. If we have Judea and Israel is strong, all of a sudden America could be very uncomfortable with that. As long as Israel is weak, subservient, controllable, vassal state, that's something that the West and America can tolerate, deal with, and even approve of. But the minute Israel is actually sovereign and does what is in our own rights without considering and hyper-focusing and obsessing about what the world and America will say, that's already a new horizon, a new dimension that they're not ready for.
What if it's like this, to boil it down very clearly? What if the first move towards sovereignty, and I mean first move towards sovereignty, is sovereignty over Judea and Samaria? Second move is sovereignty over Tel Aviv. That's the real discussion I think we're having. But because before Israel can actually be sovereign nation, like everybody says, they think, well, what? Israel's not a sovereign nation. Well, Israel can't do anything without permission from some other country. So the fact that Israel has declared sovereignty over Judea and Samaria is the real first sovereign move that Israel can. That means we're now a sovereign nation over our sovereign land, and we can make decisions on our own. That's in the face of everybody else that's trying to tell Israel what to do. I don't know.
Well, I'll tell you, what's happening is that they're blocking us in sovereignty. Inside Gaza, they're bringing in Qatar and Turkey to oversee the reconstruction and monitor the Hamas. Qatar and Turkey, that's like a part of the Iranian axis. Those are not our friends. Israel just bombed Qatar because they were harboring the Hamas leadership. So you take a step back and you're like, wait a minute, you want our country to be 9 miles wide? Because without Judea and Samaria, it's like a fraction of the borders of Israel. With Turkey and Qatar in one side, it's like they want to continuously keep us weak. And we need to be proactive and assert our presence in this land. That's why we're here.
Luke, you said this before. You said listening to the left or the secular and the right, it's almost like hearing the same person. I don't remember seeing a larger gap between Jews in the land of Israel, from the left to the right, secular to religious, being in the land of Israel versus the Jews of the diaspora. Why? Because the Jews in the land of Israel experienced firsthand being within the land during October 7th, when the ground was shaking so much that it wasn't clear in October 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th, if you remember, is Hezbollah going to attack? Is Iran going to attack? Are they going to pounce on us when we're weak? Are we in the final days? What is going to happen here? They experienced that fundamental existential insecurity, and the result of that experiential insecurity was seeing whether it's from religious or just a practical political level, the importance of Judea and Samaria, the importance of the West Bank, that without that, they understood in Tel Aviv that they would have been all October 7th, whereas the Jews in America that are sending their kids to Harvard and Yale and Princeton feel this overwhelming need to virtue signal and to continue being victims and to continue aspiring for the love of the left and the Democratic Party that will never come. And so that's why there's this divergence between the two.
I think you can
Are
almost
you just
say
describing two people just now? Were you putting?
I was going to
Kushner
say
and
you could
Witkoff
almost
in
say that
Interesting.
outside Israel, the right is moving left, and the left is moving more left, and inside of Israel, the right is moving more right, but the left is moving
More right.
more to the right, which I think is really fascinating. Like you were saying, it's the difference between the people that have gone through the last 2 years and the people who haven't.
Well, I want to fix that language a little bit in Israel, because right and left in Israel,
Yeah,
I feel like
yes.
that's a little bit of an old language. Really, what's happening is we are living prophetically in the times of the book of Judges.
Mhm.
And what happens in the book of Judges? Israel veers from the path, and then the Philistines or another nation comes and attacks Israel. And then that struggle brings us back to God, brings us back to alignment. And then there's quiet and peace in the land for 40 years. It happens again. And then so right now we're just in the middle of another cycle. We are right now experiencing being attacked by the Philistines. And it's not that we're shifting more to the right. We're literally shifting back more to ourselves. We're becoming
Towards God.
more Jewish, more towards
Well,
God.
Jeremy,
I
I
think
just want
we,
to, what Jeremy, I just need what Jeremy said, and I want to pass this back to you, Jeremy, because you're like the Tanakh specialist, at least over me. But when Israel went to the exile, when we were exiled from our land, it was eventually, right, there was King David and then King Solomon and then King Solomon's son that listened to the advice of his friends and not to the sages of Israel and taxed and burdened the nation, which led to this division where all of a sudden there was two kingdoms, and the kingdoms of the north created altars and to decentralize Jerusalem, and then we were exiled around the world. And now that we've reconvened after thousands of years, it's almost like we've reconvened to where we've left off. Right. And now there's Tel Aviv with a decentralized secularism, and then Judea. But now instead of separating, we're converging to each other. We're coming back to each other again. And that's what it feels like. We are on the cusp of having that Davidic King David leader who I don't know who it is or how they're going to come to power or what's going to be. I don't know. But I know it's going to happen and that it's happening right now.
Well, I'll tell you, the most exciting thing for me is I just think about the next leader after Benjamin Netanyahu. I don't know if he's going to run in these next
Bad
elections.
news. He said he's going to run.
So eventually he's going to stop running. Eventually something is going to change. And that next leader is going to be the most exciting leader that Israel has ever seen.
I just want to say that on the topic of Israel moving back towards God, I think we witnessed that personally in the Knesset a couple of days ago. There was multiple members of Knesset that got up and talked about their faith, but the one guy that stood out to me, his name's Boaz Bismuth or something like that. He's not religious, really, outwardly at least, but he got up and for like 10 minutes, he didn't talk about the topic of the event. He went on like a 10-minute powerful speech about his faith journey. And it was incredible. Like he just went on and on about how deep his faith in God is and the Bible and his family. And that was it. Like that was all he talked about. And then that was like a firsthand witness of Israel turning back to God in the Bible, which I think is just incredible.
Yeah, I really see that. And I think really what's kind of sparked that return are the hostages themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone in Israel has been thinking about the hostages. They were praying for the hostages. I mean, Tehila and I, we were in a supermarket before Shabbat, and there was a big screen on the television, and we just saw the very beginning of the hostages leaving Gaza. And Tehila, my wife, in the middle of the supermarket, bursts out crying. And she was so emotional. It's like, finally, after 2 years, I can breathe again.
Mm.
And that was just the heart of what everyone in some way or another, exactly, we just finally. And then the hostages come back. And people you've been praying for, thinking about, worrying about, and you hear what they have to say. And so many of them, all they did was praise God. All of them shared their strengthened faith. All of them shared their experiences, their encounters with spirituality that they found in the darkest place. And that is literally shifting the nation.
What do you say to because I think this is fantastic, and I totally agree with you where we're headed here, where the nation is. And one of the guys that came out, every single one of them, like I saw an interview with one of the mothers, and like, what's the first thing he wanted? And she was like, well, tzitzit, actually. And so that's the conversation, these people that were coming out of this darkness from a very secular place in the beginning to just like, I just want more of God. And they're searching and they're trying to find God.
They're doing more for Israel than any rabbi ever could.
right.
Ever. They are, because they're offering people an opportunity to have tattoos on your arms, look totally non-Orthodox, non-Torah observant, and be totally in love with God.
And I have to admit, I was wrong. I really was expecting them to come back and to be able to, possibly not even to be able to articulate a sentence, to be broken and destroyed. And yes, they were broken, but when they were, that breaking, right? Karov Hashem lenishbarei lev, King David says. God is close to the brokenhearted. So he broke these hearts, he broke them, and he has since then infused them with his light in a way that only he can do. And that is shining to the whole country.
That's what's happening here in Israel. And I think, Ari, you want to comment on this. I'm going to let you do that. But between Jared Kushner and Witkoff, we have a different kind of Jewish expression being voiced in the world that seems, in some ways here in Israel, it seems a little bit sinister. It seems like there's something behind that's not, and I just want to be open about this because everybody's like, well, they're Jewish. And well, that's not just a card. God is working in the Jewish nation and all of the Jewish souls across the world. But there's something that doesn't feel exactly right about this backdrop to this. Jared Kushner was talking about how Israel needs to do more for the Palestinians. And
we're talking about the 60 Minutes interview that aired this week with
right.
Kushner and Witkoff. And I have some quotes because it's pretty atrocious. And I hate to say that, but these were the guys, the negotiating team. And
right.
you could say that they helped get the hostages out of Gaza, and we should be grateful to them for whatever part they played. But I also saw that both of them are invested in Qatar. Like they have a vested interest in Qatar.
With their businesses.
Yeah. And I don't know if that's true. I think it is probably true, but that should be a cause for concern. Qatar was the headquarters for Hamas, at least until recently when Israel bombed them. But this 60 Minutes interview, I think this was Kushner. He said the biggest message that we've tried to convey to the Israeli leadership now is that the war is over. Now that the war is over, if you want to integrate Israel with the broader Middle East, you have to find a way to help the Palestinian people thrive and do better. Now, what's missing from that?
Well, that was the exact opposite of the Abraham Accords.
Exactly.
It was let's start making peace with the nations around us, and then eventually we will work out the problem with the Arabs in the land of Israel. And now it's flipped on its head, and it's the exact opposite.
Well, and also he's saying Israel's responsible, too. No responsibility on the people.
It's almost like he's undoing the very paradigm that he helped create.
I saw a report about the terrorists, the murderers that were just released from prison in exchange for the hostages. It was something like $140 million that these guys have made while they're in prison from the Palestinian Authority, because these guys pay salaries. Every Jew murderer and their families are put on the payroll, hundreds of millions of dollars every single year. And these are the people that Jared Kushner and Witkoff are saying Israel has to find a way to integrate the Palestinian people and make them thrive and do better.
160 out of the 250 convicted terrorists released from Israeli prisons are millionaires. And that all came from the pay for slay, meaning American tax money, Europeans' tax money went to the Palestinian Authority. They paid a monthly stipend, a monthly salary to these terrorists, and 160 out of 250, more than half of them are leaving prison millionaires.
I end up being shocked that there's not more murdering terrorists. They are so overwhelmingly incentivized. Why go and work a construction job from morning to night when you could just kill a few Jews, have your status and esteem among your village in the greater Arab world raised up, and you come out a millionaire with 5 degrees.
But you could say that it's only because Israel worked so hard to stop them, honestly.
And I would add to it, can I add to this, that the people who built this whole propaganda and all of this incentivized thing that supports all of this is still recognized in America as a viable peace partner.
Right.
The moderates. They're considered still the moderates.
Let's talk about this for a second. Leslie Stahl, the famous 60 Minutes interviewer, here's what she said to Witkoff and Kushner. She said, quote, "People should understand that Netanyahu, the Israelis, bombed the peacemakers, the negotiating team." Who's she talking about?
Qatar, yeah.
I mean, what's our reaction to that? Like the peacemakers. Is that not the most blatant case of something being flipped on its head that you've ever seen? And they're agreeing. I mean, Kushner says, quote, I think he, meaning Trump, felt like the Israelis were getting a little bit out of control in what they were doing, and that it was time to be very strong and stop them from doing things that he felt were not in their long-term interests, specifically referring to Israel bombing Qatar and Trump trying to put a stop to that before it happened.
I mean,
although for once,
they would never bomb Qatar if Hamas leadership wasn't sitting in their fancy hotels over there.
Hello? Why is
And
Qatar the good
they
guy?
weren't
That's what I
paying
want
and
to know.
funding Hamas. They're the funders of Hamas.
Yeah, that's what I don't get. And
And the hosts,
America
I mean,
thinks
they
that
were
this
hosting
funding
Hamas.
Hamas that say they want to destroy America. Did they don't get
It
that
gets worse.
connection?
You want to hear worse?
Yeah.
They both go off about how Witkoff met with Hamas leader Khalil al-Hayya, who had lost a son when Israel bombed Qatar. And they had like a moment together because Witkoff lost his son to a drug overdose. And so he says, quote, I had lost a son from an overdose and that we were both members of a really bad club, parents who have buried children.
It's like meeting with a Nazi whose son was shot out of a guard tower in Auschwitz and having a moment with him about having lost his son.
Kushner says, when Steve and him spoke about their sons, it turned from a negotiation with the terrorist group to seeing two human beings kind of showing a vulnerability with each other. It's just mind blowing. Why is the Palestinian Authority considered good guys? Considered the Palestinian people who Israel has to help thrive and do better, and why is Qatar considered good guys in the world today?
Well, I think you need to define what does good guys mean. Good means that they are promoting an American interest. And America's interest is to keep Israel weak. That's why they're bringing Qatar in to oversee the Hamas, who they're funding. They're bringing them to rebuild Gaza. So it's obviously they want to perpetuate this conflict. Now, there are so many interests to keep this conflict going on forever.
Yeah, you better believe it, yeah.
Never mind the spiritual battle. Just practically, so much money is made on war. The military-industrial complex. Keeping this war going is making a lot of people a lot of money. So they want to keep Israel in a way that will always keep this war in a perpetual state of the cash cow that it is for the complex.
Can I put an exclamation point on that for a second? So if America could have told Qatar to release the hostages like they just did, why couldn't they have done that on October 8th?
That is the question of all questions. What
They had the power, obviously, to do that. And what you just said, Jeremy, just makes us feel a little bit maybe
stupid.
Well, abused.
Well,
And then
I only blame us.
Israel could have put their foot down.
I only blame
You're right.
Israel. Israel is the one that's agreeing, that's negotiating with Qatar. Why are we even talking to them? Why are we talking to the Hamas? Why are we allowing ourselves to be abused? If we had a little bit of self-respect, which is slowly but surely coming, I feel it right now in Israel's bones that we want to be more independent, then we wouldn't be in this situation to begin with.
Just look at the soldiers in the army, right? The entire world, you turn on any sort of podcast in America or Europe or anyone, the Israeli army are Nazis that are committing genocide. Yet, the soldiers are returning, leaving their homes, leaving their families, seeking to be in the best units that they can be in to go fight this war of darkness rather than being like, I'm going to dodge the army, go to France, run away so I'm not considered and hated by the entire world. But they have the character and the integrity and the knowledge of truth that they're willing to stand up, and the kids in America just don't. I don't know if you're connected with the Tuckers and the Candaces. You can't turn on YouTube without hearing AIPAC, 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 AIPAC. Should AIPAC be a foreign lobby? Should AIPAC be a foreign lobby? The amount that AIPAC has invested in promoting Israel in their own understanding of what that means to promote Israel is trounced hundreds, thousands to one from what Qatar has pumped into American universities.
Oh, yeah.
$5.1 billion to American universities. They trounce AIPAC, and that's totally ignored by everyone that they've brainwashed an entire country.
Yeah.
The funders of Hamas are also funding Harvard, Stanford, Yale, and American universities. Nobody says a word because they're so committed, they're consumed with AIPAC, and the Jews are defending AIPAC and AIPAC. We need to understand that we need to finally take responsibility. That was the difference between David and Saul, and that is going to be the difference between a redemptive nation of Israel and an psychologically exiled nation of Israel. Whether we take responsibility for ourselves and really ultimately for the entire world.
Which we can see an example of exactly what you just said is the Knesset saying we're going to we're going to declare sovereignty over Judea and Samaria in the face of all the top world
And
leaders
even
that are sitting here
though
right now.
and even though a lot of the parties didn't vote, probably a lot of the Likud members didn't vote. We do know, I think, do you remember the stat of something like 80% of Likud voted on like a resolution that they approve sovereignty? Like, we do know the support is there. I mean, the room we were sitting in the other day in the Knesset, like, all of the support is
the
there.
fact is that the full support
it's just
is
a matter
there,
of getting it to the finish line.
Jeremy, you may have a word to say on this as well, is that the political move, people are seeing that it's now the time, but the process to get to that is what they're arguing about, right? The process to get to sovereignty is the argument.
Well, I think that there's two sides to it. One is, where's the nation of Israel holding? I think that if we were to do a poll, or we were to do, what is it called when they did Brexit? What are those things called? When they just when they asked the nation to vote themselves? I think that the vast majority, I mean, the popular vote would be like, absolutely, sovereignty over Judea and Samaria, never establish a foreign state in our heartland. But then it comes down to the politics. And in politics, the truth is there are a lot of pundits and there's a lot of ideas. No one really knows what's going on behind the scenes. There are private conversations that are happening between Trump and Netanyahu and Vance and Witkoff and Kushner and Saudi Arabia. And we really don't know. But where the nation is holding, where our hearts are, especially after this 2-year war, is the land of Israel is ours. We need to apply sovereignty. When it comes to the politics of it and how we actually apply the sovereignty and when we do it, I think the politics are always going to run into a wall until we do something that demands faith, courage, and action.
I think that the real vote that happened in the Knesset that we haven't spoken about, that people aren't thinking about or talking about, that is in some ways reveals the entire story here, was the cabinet has voted to approve Netanyahu's renaming of the war. It's no longer.
Hear about this.
Yeah, it just happened this last week. Overwhelmingly approved that it is Milchemet HaTkuma, which is difficult to translate. Either the war of revival, the war of resurrection, the war of uprising, whatever it is.
Tekuma is also one of the names of one of the communities that was attacked on October 7th.
Right, for the same reason. Either they are destroyed or they're going to rise up more powerfully and even stronger than before. And so there is a resurrection that's happening. We're in that part of the prophecy of Ezekiel where the bones and the sinews and the tendons and the ligaments have all come together. The bodies of the nation of Israel is returning in body to the land of Israel. And now God is blowing in the Spirit. The Spirit is entering the nation right now, and that's what you're seeing, and that's why the renaming of the war isn't just words that are being said, but it's a reality that's being recognized.
I think that's really good. I think that's amazing. As we wrap up, too, Jeremy, you usually have Torah portion insights. You've been bringing the prophecy insights today. Israel, I know, just started the cycle over. We're now back in Genesis, right? But any last insights from the Torah portion this week?
Yeah, going into this week's Torah portion, story of the flood, and it's actually the first time in the Torah that the word Hamas is used. It says the world was filled with Hamas, and God said, the world is filled with Hamas. Oh, we got to bring a flood and just destroy the world. The world cannot exist with Hamas. But Hamas isn't a very clear Hebrew word. They're like, what does that word mean? So there's about 3,000 years of tradition of what that word means. Everyone wanted to bring what their commentary was. So one was saying it's theft. Society was just stealing from each other, and that's not a way that a society can be. One said they were murdering everyone. Another one was saying they were raping all the women. And one was saying, nope, they are kidnapping people. And it's like, okay, we look now back at 3,000 years of understanding of what the word Hamas means, and what do we realize? All of them were right. They were all pointing us to exactly what Hamas is. It's absolute evil. It's stealing, it's killing, it's raping, and it's murdering. It's that. That is the evil. That's why this war isn't only about Adamah, which is land. It's about Adam, which is man. Who is man going to be in this world? Who is humanity in the future? Is it going to be filled with compassion, with grace, with love? Or is it going to be this barbaric, savage, hate-filled people that are going to destroy the world? That's really what this war is about. And Hamas, on every level, has to be obliterated for us to really rebuild God's kingdom on earth.
I think that's really interesting, too, that's this week's Torah portion. And basically the Torah is saying Hamas must be obliterated. And you have Hamas doing the antithesis of that, refusing to disarm, rearming 20,000 fighters, more than 50% of the tunnel still intact. And at the same time, you have Israel's prime minister, America's president, Secretary of State, Vice President, all saying absolutely no way will we let Hamas rearm. If they don't lay down their arms, if they don't disband, we will obliterate them.
Hell to pay.
But we all know it's a lot of hollow words. And so the question is, will the world's sane and leaders on the right side of history actually follow through and do what Scripture says needs to be done? I think that's really interesting.
Well, I think what is good to know is that Israel will always be victorious. No matter what happens, what the worlds do, what the world plans, Israel ultimately will emerge stronger, as it has always. We're on a trajectory toward the Garden of Eden, returning to the land. And so we're on a train that has already left the station.
That's right. Amen. And I think that, if you're watching or listening, that's a good prayer point for you guys too. As you know, this is in Scripture this week. It's in the Bible right there. And this is what the world leaders are saying. This is what needs to happen. Like Jeremy's saying, we all know Israel is victorious in the end, but God's kingdom runs on the prayers of those who believe in God and believe in the Bible. And that should be your homework for this week. I think that's very important. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Guys, make sure you're following, make sure you're subscribed, make sure you let us know what you think about in the comments down below. As always, stop listening to the lies and propaganda. Connect with the truth of what's happening in Israel. We'll be back very soon here at the Israel Guys.